Okay. So welcome everyone. I think this is the fifth or sixth session of the Gita Way. I'm not counting how many sessions we have done. My name is Milind Agarwal. For those of you who don't know me or haven't met me, I just put together this group purely out of love and affection for the Gita, and all of you who are so curious to learn from the Gita. Santosh and Shweta, who are the speakers of today, of the day, they become my dear friends, and thanks to the Gita, they are not only co-authors, they are also a couple married to each other in real life. They have a wonderful daughter who I just met on the screen. Her name is Prisha. Santosh and Shweta have been very kind to allow us to lend the name of the book, The Gita Way, as the name of the group on which we are studying the Gita. And more importantly, they have gifted the second edition free of cost to all the students of the Gita, because their inner conviction is that this message to reach out to more people than few. So they have been very kind to do that. So Santosh works for a large Indian MNC as head of marketing. Shweta has a corporate career behind her. She's taken a small sabbatical now, and I was just telling her, when she will soon start working, maybe a choice. So thank you, Santosh and Shweta, for coming today and spending time with us. You can begin your session.
Thank you, Dr. Milind. It's a real honor. I would like to present about Karma Yoga and role of Prarabdha. So just allow me to share the screen, and then we'll go based on the presentation. Just a second. Hope my voice is clear.
Yes, it is.
So good morning, everyone. Namaskar to everyone. Thanks for joining. The topic of today's discussion is Karma Yoga and role of Prarabdha. So just before going to the presentation, I'd like to, just set out the premise of the entire discussion. So we are human beings, we are driven by our memories, emotions, reasoning, and desire. And the entire equation of our human life is that we face uncertainty and complexities, and we have to take decisions and move on. In such situation, understanding theory of karma is really helpful. So that is what is the premise of the entire work, what we have done in terms of Gita Way. It becomes even more important when such knowledge is coming from a relevant source, a shastra like Gita. The shastra itself is a pramana in Dr. Milind's word. So in this talk, we are going to discuss what Gita says about karma. We are also going to discuss how and when karma becomes karma yoga, which is important transition, understanding the karma in detail from Gita's perspective. And we will also explore the role of prarabdha in the outcome we expect, right? Whatever we do with some purpose. So what is the role of prarabdha in getting that outcome? Whatever we are going to present will be based on Gita and some interpretation based on that. I am a believer, so wherever I'm presenting, there would be cases where I would say that as per Gita or Gita says, or I may also say that as per Krishna or Krishna says. I would request that please treat all these as a synonym. There's no difference. If I'm saying Krishna says or Gita says, the same, right? And it's up to you whether you take it as it is or with your own interpretations. The only disclaimer is that we are also a beginner. We are just a student of Gita. We are not expert of Gita. We have done some research on Gita, and we are going to present few findings from the ocean of knowledge what is already available in the Gita, right? In other words, whatever I'm going to present about Karma Yoga or role of Prarabdha is not comprehensive. It is just small findings, right? So with this premise, let me start the discussion. The first topic is karma. Just a second, I have some disturbances in voice. Just a moment, please.
Santosh, you are not audible.
Just a moment, just a moment.
Can you start from
Is some problem in the audio? I don't know.
Now I can hear you, but I could not hear you for the last minute and a half.
Okay, okay, all right. So hope I'm audible now. Let me begin from the first slide. So we have just started, so no problem if something is missed. The first topic is karma. So we have to now understand karma. Let's define. Karma is like any activity done through mind, body, and speech. It's written in Gita's chapter 18. Every activity has certain outcome. In some cases, it could be many outcome also. So there is certain outcome, definite. It's already defined. The only thing is whether that outcome is in our control or not. That is why one of the most famous quote from Gita, we all know. I mean, this particular quote needs no introduction. Karmanye vadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karm phal hetu bhurma te sangatva karmani. Which means you only have a right to the action itself and never to the fruits of that action. Do not make the rewards of your action as your motive, and do not develop any attachment for avoiding action. For the purpose of this talk, let's keep daily routine, regular activities, and whatever we do without any purpose or without any goal on routine basis, let's keep that out of context as of now. Let's focus on the definition of karma, which is done for a duty, which is done for a purpose, which is also done for a desire, which is also done for some efforts expecting something, which is also done to pursue knowledge, which is also done for charity or done for nature. So we'll limit our discussion on karma, keeping these factors in mind, right? So I'm coming back to this sloka again. Gita says that outcome of this individual efforts is beyond our area of influence. The simplest definition of what I've heard in previous discussion in this forum is karma is duty, and duty centricity is actually the summary of karma yoga. We'll discuss this in detail in coming slides. Let's explore this shlok further, that we know that outcome is not in our control. Then the common question will come that why to perform the action at all? And there is another question, that whether no action is also an option, right? This particular equation, this particular shloka actually says that we should not also avoid action. There should not be any. We should not develop any attachment to avoiding action as well at the same time. So let us understand this from example of a farmer. So let's say there is a farmer. He has an instant goal to produce and reap a healthy crop. Now, only karma is in his hand, so he will have full control on his karma. He will do things like quality, quantity of seeds, manure, irrigations to ensure that the crop is coming with full whatever is desiring for. He will also do his honest part in terms of efforts and hardship on the field. He will also use his all knowledge and experiences, which is accumulated or transferred through generations, on practices of sowing to ensure that there's no compromise on the best practices of cultivation. Still, there is no certainty that he's going to get best of the results from that particular field out of his whatever efforts done. With this uncertainty, should he abandon his duty or compromise on the effort? This is the question which needs an answer, and Gita guides that no action is not an option. Now, the point here is, even if he decides to do nothing, there will be weeds that will germinate on its own. So he's not actually keeping himself away from karma. He will have to anyway clean that particular weed to make any kind of use of that particular field. So even if we choose to do no option, it doesn't mean that we can avoid karma, right? So the summary of the shloka is that only karma is in our control. We should not have reward as motive for karma, and we should not also develop kind of attachment to have no action, no karma at the same time. So in this context, we should understand what is the purpose of karma. So although outcome of the action is not in our control, it does not mean that we should not think of goal or purpose, right? This is the premise of entire Karma Yoga. In fact, the premise of entire book, The Gita Way. For example, in the previous example, getting the healthiest crop is the purpose. In case of Arjuna, driven by his inherent nature, he also had a purpose in the war. So the premise of karma, though we say that it is different from result, I mean, we should not drive our activity keeping fruits or reward in the mind. But at the same time, we should also be sure that we are working for a purpose. Even duty is a purpose, right? So we need to understand what is my purpose, what is my goal, is my karma is good enough for the purpose? And Krishna has given the guidance in such situation. Now Krishna gives guidance on a real insight on finding purpose driven by inherent nature, and Krishna also defines about the karma, dividing that karma into two broad departments of prescribed act and prohibited act. We call it duty and vikarma. So we need to understand this in detail in coming slides. So this is from one shlok in chapter 18, and it is also given in other form in chapter 3 as well. That even though I may have faults, one's own dharma is still superior to accepting the dharma of another. Even if that dharma is perfectly observed, by performing the action prescribed in accordance with the inherent nature, a person never incurs any sin. What Krishna suggests here is that we carry a unique qualities. We carry unique swabhava. Inherent nature is swabhava. It is so unique that depending on that, we should define our karma, our action. And depending on our action, and it should be direct to our own dharma, swadharma. Swadharma is indirectly my personal goal. And I'm not going to share this goal with anyone. So my dharma would be different for even my father's dharma, my wife's dharma, my children's dharma. So it is so unique. It is so unique that I am going to travel a unique path. I am going to achieve a unique goal in the entire process. And how to find this swadharma? The answer is it's hidden in our inherent nature. Krishna also says that you can't escape your inherent nature. So in chapter 18, he says to Krishna, so he says to Arjuna that bound to your specific duty, Kaunteya, which arises from your inherent nature, you will be compelled to perform the action. It's because of illusion that you do not wish to perform. So he's actually saying this to Arjuna that even if I haven't given you, the entire knowledge about Gita, its concluding chapter, in fact, he's mentioning this in chapter 18. Arjuna is bound to perform his duty in the war. His illusion is actually temporary. His inherent nature will pull back himself, and he would ensure that he's actually participating in the war. So in other words, we can't escape our inherent nature. Anything if we are going to do opposite to our inherent nature or different from our true swabhava, it's going to create pressure on us. And that is the entire premise of Gita as well. The moment Arjuna got away from his inherent nature of being Kshatriya and fighting for truthfulness, he started getting all the stress of inaction, aversion, depression, and all those things, which is the basic premise of Gita when Krishna started the discourse on the Gita. Krishna also defines the karma into two broad parameters: prescribed act and prohibited act. These are basically do's and don'ts of life. Prescribed act are, is like duties directly or indirectly aligned with the purpose or supreme goal. It's basically driven by inherent nature, so it will impart sense of joy while working on it. And whatever is prohibited, it's simple. Anything driven by aversion, like Arjuna did in chapter 1, anything driven by desire, lust, or pleasure of senses, which basically do not add any value to the purpose of life. And how to know the difference between prescribed duty and prohibited act is basically the understanding of purpose. The purpose should align to a bigger, larger purpose, larger goal, supreme goal, we say. There should be righteousness of the purpose, right? That is the key difference which we'll explore in the context of Karma Yoga in coming slides, right? Krishna says further in chapter 18 itself, shloka 7, in the context of prohibited act, and prohibited acts that are motivated by desire, that it is advisable to abandon a prescribed duty. Sorry, it is not advisable to abandon a prescribed duty. Such abandonment is through ignorance, which declared as evil. So he's directly saying that don't abandon your prescribed duty. Prescribed duty is basically your kartavya in a given context. If anyone gives his prescribed duty due to fear of physical strain or pain, he will not reap the fruit of renunciation, right? So he further warns the same concept. He also suggests that prescribed duty performed unconditionally without any attachment to the outcome is a truthful form of renunciation. So he is also giving this guidance that, this is the basic premise of Karma Yoga, that whatever we are doing, whatever duty we are pursuing, it should be done unconditionally without thinking of outcome. So further on prohibited act, there's another guidance from Krishna. One must understand about the action, and one must also understand about forbidden action, which is prohibited act discussed just now. Krishna also says one must also understand what non-actions. Non-action is basically akarma. This is karma in the kind of advanced stage of Karma Yoga, when performer detach himself from the duty itself, from the karma itself. So we will discuss this in some other session. It is of very spiritual importance. This is the highest stage of yoga actually. But from the discussion of this topic, let us discuss about the vikarma and how to identify it. So vikarma can be classified in two broad categories: inaction and hyperaction. Okay, and the symbols are very simple. Inaction is like lethargy and procrastination, which actually creates aversion from doing activity. The impact is either we do inadequate action or we miss the opportunity. And hyperaction is lust or desire. The problem with hyperaction is it's basically driven by seeing others. It's basically driven by outside, not actually inside, right? It's not driven by swabhav. It's driven by something we see outside and desire to achieve that. So in this particular thing, the risk is we end up pursuing wrong goals, which is not your own, which is not your swadharma. So we need to identify prohibited act, in other words, vikarma. It should not come in our action. So let's come to the case of purpose of Arjuna. Okay. Just to understand, how this prescribed act or theory of karma actually aligns with his story in the context of Mahabharata war. So desire of winning the war could have been a purpose, or you can say pseudo purpose for Arjuna. But with such kind of desire, actually fear also comes, fear of losing the war. And with fear comes doubt, and doubt kills the entire sense of purpose. So that is the risk when we treat desire as a purpose. So there's a subtle difference we need to understand when desire is the purpose or when duty is the purpose, right? Now, for example, in first chapter, when he abandons the war, he was actually thinking of after effects of war, and he's considering that he should not do any of his prescribed duty, being Kshatriya, being proponent of fighting for truth. So what Arjuna goes here is called aversion. So like desire, aversion is also something which diverts us from our prescribed duty. Now the role of Gita or role of Krishna in the entire 18 chapter discourse is basically he shifts the purpose of a warrior from winning a war to fighting for truth and righteousness. And this is very important shift. And this is very subtle. This also imparts a very subtle difference between desire and real purpose. Because desire is having a timeline. Desire is limited to winning something or gaining something. But fighting for truth or righteousness doesn't have any timeline. Which, in other words, with such kind of purpose, even losing the war does not end your pursuit. Okay, and it doesn't lead to any kind of fear as well at the same time, because it's purpose of life. It is unconditional that Arjuna has to fight for truth or righteousness for lifelong. It's not limited to that particular Mahabharata war we know as Great War, right? That is why Krishna suggests once prescribed duty is known, in other words, aligned to your purpose, it should be done unconditionally. Okay, so let's try to understand the hurdles in understanding the desire and real purpose. So the guidance here given by Krishna is actually in chapter 2, verse 62 and 63. He says, person dwelling on sense objects develops attachment from them. Attachment leads to desire, and unfulfilled desire causes anger. He further says, from anger arises delusion. Delusion leads to confusion in the intellect, and confusion in the intellect creates loss of reason and purpose. That is devastating, right? So this is, we have modeled in our book as desire and trap. Desire driven by attachment is a vicious cycle. The moment you are attached to something, desire will create a pseudo purpose. We will feel that we are working on a goal, but we are actually creating delusion in our intellect. Intellect, if I summarize intellect in simple terms, intellect is whatever we have accumulated so far in terms of knowledge and experience and wisdom. And delusion is, and this is real asset. I mean, any individual has the real asset in terms of knowledge, intellect, and wisdom. And if there is some illusion in the entire real asset, accumulated asset, it's a big loss. That is why Krishna says this state is devastating. Right? So we need to understand this vicious cycle, and we also need to understand how to break this cycle. And Krishna has given a solution in terms of hierarchy of control in different chapter, not in consequence of the same. So in chapter 3, verse 42, he says, the senses are greater than body, the mind is greater than senses, intellect is greater than mind, and the conscious self is above intellect, right? This is very important to understand here is that if senses drive our karma, it will focus only on comfort of body, physical attributes, which will result in inaction or aversion in most of the cases. Lethargy, procrastination, we discuss in Vikarma. And in all probability, it's not real purpose, right? Mind is also not the right driver. If mind drives, then there is a big risk of getting trapped into desire, pursuing goals of others. So mind is also risky. So bottom two is actually non-desirable, control parameter. The upper two, like intellect and conscious self, are aligned with our karma yoga philosophy. If we are driven by intellect, which is knowledge plus experience plus wisdom, we are on right path. And if we are driven by conscious self, that is the absolute desirable ideal state, right? It automatically resolves all the complication of, contemplating results, working on, dealing with any kind of certainty or hardship while working on a purpose. In chapter 5, verse 7, Krishna says, the karma yogi who has fully conquered his mind and mastered his senses, and whose heart is pure, and who has identified himself with his purpose of life remains untainted in all his action. So in other words, Krishna warns here that mind and senses must be conquered. They should not drive our purpose or action, right? The question we have to answer every time, whatever we pursue, whatever we do is, who's on the driver's seat? So keeping this in mind, let's try to understand what are the attributes of a karma yogi. So chapter 2, verse 48. This is exactly the next verse after Karmanya Vadhikarste Shloka, in which Krishna establishes that karma is under your area of influence. The result is absolutely not. And Krishna also establishes that inaction is not an option. Immediately after that, Krishna also gives solution uh, in terms of what should be done and how the karma should be performed. He says, perform your duties, establishing yourself in yoga, renouncing the attachment, and with equanimity, success and failures. Evenness of mind is called yoga. Krishna actually says, yogast kuru karmani, which means do your action in the state of yoga, which is also known as samatva. The entire definition of equipoised mind is the basically summary of karma yoga. Samatva is the summary. Samatva is basically handling contradictory feelings like pain and pleasure. Frustration is failure, and even ecstasies of success. Samatva in handling both loss and gain. And it's not easy. That is why yoga, real yoga, is something to be achieved, the state to be achieved. That is why we are discussing all these things, right? Now if we see this particular shloka, it also gives a clue that this is the solution, a kind of solution to come out of desire and trap as well, right? Okay, before going ahead, let me answer. Let me make two more points here. That people may think that what is the problem in celebrating our ecstasy and success, and even frustration and failure is natural. So here are points. Actually, it's just interpretation from these shlokas that there's no problem, except that ecstasy and success may create overconfidence, arrogance, and desire to pursue wrong goals. And frustration and failure, there is a big possibility that there are possibilities that you may be working on a right path, but because of some roadblocks, some small failures, you may change your path because of frustration. So in both the cases, we need samatva to remain on path, remain on right path. So now coming to the second part of our discussion, that is prarabdha of karma. Okay. We understood so far that how to take control of karma, who should be on driver's seat. We understood the definition of karma. We also covered in short that what is karma yoga, keeping samatva in mind. So now let me introduce the concept of prarabdha, which is defined in Gita itself. This is verse 14, chapter 18. Krishna says, the following are the 5 factors operating towards accomplishment of action. This is the big question. Actually, it comes to our mind that results not in our control. Then who's actually controlling the outcome? So actually, Krishna is answering that question. So he's saying the following are the 5 factors operating towards accomplishment of action by mind, body, and speech. Whenever we are talking about action, it is actually not only by actual activity we see physically, but it is also by mind and speech. The factors are the body, the performer, all various senses, including karmendriya. There are many kinds of endeavors. So in simple terms, all our efforts. And the final 5th one is prarabdha of karma. That is also known as destiny, right? And the problem with the composition of all 5 is that we don't know how much weightage prarabdha carries. And that is where the concept of luck or randomness comes in our mind. That though karma is in our full control, but outcome is not. So who's actually controlling the outcome? Now here is a point. Actually, I'm asking this question to myself, that we know, that Krishna is Yogeshwar. He's master of yoga. And we also know the fact that the entire universe follow an order. It's difficult to believe that Krishna could be proponent of luck, right? So it's very hard to believe that Prarabdha could be luck. And what it is actually that needs some understanding. So let's try to understand from a small example of driving. So this example is actually from our real life, and it's a small example. It's a small example in a sense that I'm not going to discuss purpose. I'm going to take a small activity from daily routine, which is it's a hypothetical case. Let's say I have an office around 18 kilometers from my house, and I have an instant goal after my office hours to reach my home by driving back safely. Okay, this is my instant objective, and to achieve this instant objective, what all are the duties in my full control? It could be my driving skills, it could be my senses, condition of car, fuel, oil, tire pressure, etc. It could be my discipline of driving, following all traffic rules. With all these in control, there is high probability that I will reach home safely. But still, it is not certain. That is where the entire concept of Prarabdha comes in picture. So let's assume in same example.
Santosh, sorry to interrupt. Your voice is a little low. Can you speak louder or closer to the mic, please? Because attendant participants are finding it difficult to hear you.
Okay.
Thank you, Santosh.
Is it better? Is it better?
Yeah, this is better. Thank you.
I think this mic was turned opposite. Okay. I got it now. Hope this is better, much better, right?
Yeah, this is. Please proceed. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So let me repeat. So my instant objective was to drive back home safely with karma in control, like condition of car, my driving skills, following traffic rules, in short. But still, I'm not certain whether it is guaranteed that I won't have any kind of trouble while driving back home. Why? Let's take an hypothetical case that there is a sudden rain and road becomes slippery. Then what would I do? I'll adjust my karma. I'll try to reduce the speed or adjust the speed according to the new condition which has just arrived in front of me. I'm still in full control, but still there's no certainty because there are other conditions working also in my outcome, in the outcome of my purpose in this particular example. For example, there are individuals driving alongside me on the same road. Whether they are in full control or not, we don't know. We don't know their driving skills. There could be someone driving recklessly. There could be someone drunk. We don't know whether road conditions are properly maintained, which was done maybe years earlier than this particular event is happening. So what actually happens is there is a possibility, if not big, that someone still gets his car skid and bang into mine, resulting in disturbance in my purpose, which I desire to achieve in this small example. Right. So the point I want to mention here is that though karma was in my full control, the outcome was not in full control, and it is actually dependent on the everything around, not only the individuals around, but also the nature, the condition of road, and it was also dependent on karma done in past. For example, the person who has made the road earlier, whether he has completed or done as per the prescribed duty or not, that was also one of the contentions in deciding result of my karma in that particular time. So in other words, prarabdha or destiny appears random, but it follows a natural pattern, right? Which is basically cause and effect. But this natural pattern is hard to decode. That is why we often term it as a luck or random activity, right? The result, whatever we are getting, is actually cumulative effect of all activities done in past, however small or big, by everyone around, not only by me. Okay, and nature also plays important role in this. In this example, timing of outcome is also known. For example, I mentioned that road might have been maintained few years back and result has come that time. So timing of outcome of any karma is also not defined. we are doing activity now that may cause results somewhere, sometime later. It could be days, months, or year. It's like a butterfly effect. Butterfly effect is a term coined by Edward Lorenz in his theory of chaos, where he mentions that any small or insignificant change in initial conditions can create big differences in final outcome. So he's created a model, a weather model, where he studied tornadoes, where he proved this theory by saying that it may have occurred because somewhere weeks earlier, some butterfly has created some disturbances, small disturbances, by just flapping its wings, and it may have created tornado. So, I mean, this is the best example to mention here, is that we don't know what actually creating the impact in the outcome. We can also test this experiment by doing a simple dice experiment. You take 2 dices and try to do whatever best possible similar throw of dices on your table. It's almost impossible to get, same result every time. It only proves the point that any small variation which is possible can create big differences in the outcome. It also points out the interconnectedness among everyone. We think that we are doing karma, but it is actually connected with everyone, with our family, society, nature, nation, entire globe, universe. So this interconnectedness is important to understand, and that is why Krishna also suggests yajna, tap, and dan as prescribed duty, which should be done. Yajna is basically for nature, tap is basically for self in pursuit of knowledge, and dan is basically for society. This the moment we understand this interconnectedness, we also understand our responsibility towards others, not only for self. And the moment we understand the responsibility for others, it actually creates lower level of randomness in the prarabdha, right? In earlier example, for just to mention this point, suppose everyone would have followed the prescribed duty, including the one who made that particular road years earlier. There was a big possibility that everyone would have achieved their instant purpose of driving home safely. So with this, let me come close to the concluding part of this discussion by understanding the case of Arjuna in 2 different versions. The version 1 is day 1 after Gita, and version 2 is day 13, during the Great War. So on day 1, after Gita, Arjun is clear on purpose. Arjun is clear of his role in the war. He is ready to fight irrespective of win or loss. He is clear on his own dharma. In fact, he is the first receiver of knowledge on karma yoga, yoga of knowledge, yoga of devotion, based on Bhagavad Gita, the divine knowledge, and that's true directly from Krishna, right? But day 13, something has happened which questions the entire premise of Arjuna's purpose, whatever he has learned from the Gita. What happened on day 13? On day 13 was the day when Abhimanyu was killed by Jayadratha. Jayadratha killed Abhimanyu in a kind of deceitful trap, which is called Chakravyuha. We all know that story, so I'm not going to that story. I'm going to the part what happened after that. Arjuna came to know, and he had this regret that why he was away. He was not available in that particular time during the war, because he was the only one who knew how to break Chakravyuha. But unfortunately, he was away. He was busy in some other part of battlefield, and he could not come to the rescue of Abhimanyu at that point in time. So it was a regret for Arjuna. And when he came to know all about the trap, or deceitful trap, in fact, by Jayadratha, he got into a kind of emotional outbreak. Right? The emotional breakdown was such that he got a mixed feeling of both, regret that he was not there at right time, and rage that he has to take revenge from Jayadratha. And in such emotional breakdown, he took a vow, a pledge that he will kill Jayadratha either before the very next sunset, or he will kill himself by jumping into fire. So this is the point of a story which I want to discuss here. That what happened to Arjuna's knowledge, wisdom, being the first-hand receiver of Gita directly from Krishna. Excuse me. Why? There are a few questions, fundamental questions actually I'm raising here is why he basically places rage of father above purpose of war. So why he forgot everything about samatva, the equipoise mind discussed in Gita, right?
Santosh, we lost your voice again.
Yeah, just a second. Yeah. Okay, so let me repeat here this last part. Arjuna, the behavior of Arjuna was not consistent. On day one till day 12, the summary is that he was a karma yogi, knowing everything about samatva, and he's doing his duty, knowing the purpose of war in mind. But on day 13, the rage of father supersedes the purpose of war, and he took a self-defeating vow. And what happened after that? That is very important to understand the entire equation of prarabdha in the context of this discussion. So what has happened? His pledge was, was kind of self-defeating. Jayadratha has to just figure out that he has to hide himself for that day, and Arjuna is going to kill himself. So Jayadratha did exactly same thing. He, instead of Arjuna taking Arjuna's challenge to fight, he decided to hide himself. All he had to do was to manage just one day, and in his and he was almost successful in getting that getting himself hidden on that particular day. But it was kind of self-defeat for Arjuna. If he is not able to kill Jayadratha that day, he will kill himself. So the entire purpose of the way we know Arjuna now after reading Mahabharata would have been different if Arjuna was killed by his self-defeating vow. So here Krishna intervened just to help Arjuna, and why he intervened we'll discuss. He created a temporary sunset little before the actual one through his Yog Maya. It was kind of extended solar eclipse, and Arjuna looking at the sunset surrounded by his people, Pandavas, and he was like defeated. That sun is now set, and he has to be ready to jump into the fire because of bounded by his own vow, his own pledge, right? And he decided to do so. Meanwhile, what happened? Jayadratha could not stop himself, looking at Arjuna that he's going to kill himself. He could not stop himself. He came out just to mock Arjuna. And that was the time when Krishna removed the temporary sunset, and Arjuna took no time killing Jayadratha. So in the entire story, the point I want to mention is that Krishna intervened. And the question comes, why Krishna intervened? Krishna intervened because he himself has promised in Gita that yada yada hi dharmasya glani bharvati bharata abhyudhanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijameham. Whenever there is a decline in dharma, O Bharata, and wherever there is an increase in adharma, it is then that I manifest myself. So it's basically Krishna's promise to all of us that whenever the virtue of righteousness is in danger, he will manifest himself to intervene. So we know that we can't control prarabdha, but we can trust Krishna. He will keep intervening. Now I'm coming to the final slide. I'll try to bring everything discussed for a normal, regular human being like us in one slide, that humans are driven by memory, emotions, reasoning, and desire, like we discussed the case of Arjuna. The problem with us is that we treat memory for history and regrets. We treat emotions for pain and pleasure, loss and gain, success and failures. We do reasoning only for contemplation of future, and we treat desire for only gain and success. all we have to do, utilizing Gita knowledge of Karma Yoga, is to shift memory from history, regrets, to learning, knowledge, and wisdom. We have to shift emotions of pain and pleasure to bliss, a kind of state of Sadchit Anand, which is the definition of God Himself, and which is also, as per Vedic philosophy, our goal. And we have to shift reasoning, our ability to reason anything, from contemplation of result to decision and action for a duty. And we have to shift desire from gain or result of our activity in terms of fruit to purpose of life. So if we are able to shift these parameters, we are actually on the path of Karma Yoga. It's basically making our weakness a kind of strength. So that is how I would like to summarize our discussion here. I am now opening the forum for any question, answer, discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Santosh. This was a very, very interesting session on Karma Yoga and Prarabdha. And of course, you know, there are lots of people waiting eagerly to, you know, ask you questions. And I want you and Shweta to, if you can come on your video screens so that...
I'm there.
Yeah. Shweta, can you switch on your video, please? If you
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So yeah, hi Shweta. So for many of you who joined the session later, you know, today's speakers on Karma Yoga and Prarabdha are Santosh and Shweta. As I said earlier, they are co-authors of the book The Gita Way, after which our own study group has been named. And they are also a happily married couple. And they study the Gita, they spread the message of the Gita, and they practice the Gita. So now this session is open, and some of you asked me on private chat about where can you buy the book, The Gita Way. When the first edition was available for sale, it might still be available on Amazon. If you choose to buy a hard copy, you can go there and buy. But the second edition, which is the updated edition, is available free of cost for download. You can go to gitaway.in, which is our group website, and you can download it free of cost. So now the forum is open for questions and answers. You have seen, you've heard Santosh speak about Karma Yoga and Prarabdha. I request Shweta to share some of her thoughts before we take the first question. Shweta, your mic needs to go on unmute, and then you can share, you know, maybe 2-3 minutes or 5 minutes on Prarabdha. Okay, Prarabdha is very confusing. Shweta, I can't hear you. Are you speaking to us? Shweta, you can say something so that we know that you're audible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I heard yes, sir. Yes, now it's better.
Yeah.
So just, you know, Prarabdha. So I'll just ask a group question, you know. Prarabdha or destiny or fate or kismat or niyati. Okay, there are so many connotations of the same word. Is very confusing for a lot of people. It's like, okay, if we are destined, if this was destined to happen, why should I even do anything? And anyways, you know, मेरी किस्मत में होगा तो पैसे मिल जाएंगे, मेरी किस्मत में होगा तो ये हो जाएगा. And people have these, you know, own interpretations, and you know, I would say, shouldn't say it's a misinterpretation, but yeah, they are confused about this.
Yeah.
So can you throw some light on what you think is Prarabdha, niyati, destiny, fate, kismat?
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Shweta. That's okay. No, your audio is still not clear.
Okay, Dr. Milind, if with your permission, I would like to answer this question.
Okay.
Okay. See, the entire point of Prarabdha is that we can't control it. Although it is, like discussed, it's a combination of cause and effect of many things, whatever has happened in past and whatever is happening today. If we could develop a supercomputer who can account for everything, it is decodable. But for a human mind, it is almost close to impossible that we can decode what's happening, what's going to happen, you know, decoding our entire permutation combination. So that is why that is why Gita says that we can't control Niyati, and that is why we should not think of that in a way. And when we talk about Karma Yoga also talks about, surrender. Like I discussed briefly about akarma, when we surrender our karma itself, that we are detaching ourselves from the thought of being doer of any activity. So we are detaching from karma itself. It's like real surrender of everything to the Supreme. So like Krishna intervened, I treat Krishna as Prarabdha. I believe that Krishna, being Prarabdha, will intervene and will ensure that if I am on the right path, he will help me. And if I am deviating from my path, he will ensure course correction to bring back me on the path. And that is the real Prarabdha. So this way I would like to answer. I hope I answer your question.
Yes, I learned something new, that Krishna will intervene if I am on the righteous path. If I deflect from that path, Krishna will not intervene and let me figure out my own lessons on the way, and then come to the righteous path eventually. So I'll make some mistakes, injure myself, get beaten up, but learn the lessons and come back to the righteousness vector. So yeah, that's an amazing thought, which amazing lesson or insight.
So in other words, Prarabdha is working is working parallelly, simultaneously, or you may say Krishna is doing his part. We are interpreting it differently. We think that we are getting failure, but it could be like course correction, like you said. Learning from that and getting.
But I want to hear Shweta's perspective. I hope her mic starts working. Shweta, you co-wrote the book. You are a co-author, and I'm not going to let you get away by being silent and allow Santosh to take questions. Be the Arjuna in this battle.
I am co-author, but the idea of this book is only Santosh.
Yeah. We all know. We all know.
I think Santosh is the right person.
जो सारे क्वेश्चंस के आंसर दे, उनका जो पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू है गीता का, I think he is the right person.
No. I know, like a good.
So she's trying to escape actually.
Yeah. We understand where you're coming from, but I still insist that you have to say something because you are a co-speaker. So just share your thoughts. It can be anything about Karma Yoga, Prarabdha, about Gita Way. I would love to hear your views on this subject. Feel free. Don't. There's no pressure. This is all a friendly study group. When I see somebody silent, I feel there is some deeper wisdom hidden in people. So that's why I provoke them. And I'm sorry, I'm a bit candid and direct.
Okay, so Dr. Billy, meanwhile she composes her answer. I would like to answer Navneet Surana's question.
Yeah.
He's put on chat. He says that if some person is actually by inherent nature is doing bad things like corruption and all those things, and he thinks that it is aligned with inherent nature, whether it is correct in the context of yoga.
Santosh, your audio is not clear.
Hello. It is clear now?
Yeah, you'll have to hold it closer to your mouth, Santosh.
I've kept it very close. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, now it's better.
Okay, anyway, so let me repeat. So Navneet Surana's question in simple terms is, if someone is by his own nature, is driven by his own inherent nature, doing corruption or bad things, whether it is aligned with the principles of Karma Yoga. So my answer here is, whenever we are talking about Swabhav or inherent nature driven purpose, we are actually in the context of Karma Yoga also talking about righteousness of that purpose. Okay, that is a bigger topic to discuss, and it is very well explained in Gita. If you see Gita, in initial 9 to 10 chapters, Krishna explains everything about Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and then he changes the gear. He shows his Vikral Roop, he shows his universal form. I mean, the question is, after giving such discourse, why it is required to even show the universal form? It is actually kind of symbolic from interpretation perspective. We are just doing by conceptual blending can understand. The universal form is actually the alignment of anyone's individual purpose with universal goal. For example, in case of Kshatriya, in case of Arjuna, being Kshatriya, fighting for war, winning war for Pandava could have been his individual purpose. But fighting for truth, for righteousness is actually universal purpose which Krishna is driving. So, like in the context of Prarabdha also, we discussed that Krishna intervened. Krishna intervened because he's driving a universal purpose. And we are driving our individual purpose. And we don't know the connection. So, in the context of understanding our inherent nature, Swabhava, we should also align the truthfulness or righteousness of our purpose. It cannot be any purpose. So we should know the difference. Like Vikarma, we discuss in detail. Vikarma clearly says if we are driven by lust, desire, thinking of quick gain, thinking of goals of others, it is not aligned to our purpose. So I hope I answered Navneet's question.
I think Navneet should be happy with that answer. I think personally it was a clearer answer, and about people who are who are, I would say, influenced. I would say wrongly influenced by by philosophy. Sorry, am I audible, Shweta?
Yeah, you're clear.
Yeah, and there is an Lord Krishna says in the Gita, divine Devik Santap Sampada and Asuri Sampada, demoniac, divine and demoniac Sampadas in the Gita. And in my view, people who follow the path of corruption are endowed with the demoniac Sampada. That's why they behave in that manner. They're carrying that baggage with them from their past inherent tendencies, what things they have done in the past. And because of that, they behave in that manner. So you will always see, and this is more to just to add on to Santosh's answer about people who do wrong things, like they're corrupt and they keep on doing these things without stopping. So they are they carry the Asuri Sampada, which they are born with. That's why they behave like that, and eventually they will evolve into on the path of righteousness, and they'll achieve the Devi Sampada or the divine Sampada. Okay, Shweta, are you ready with your thoughts, or should I just be kind enough to give it back to Santosh? I'm going to prod you till you speak to all of us.
Yeah. Okay. Meanwhile, let me answer another question from Harshul, who's asking that what about people who use their intellect untruthfully? So you're right. There is a big possibility that even intellect can deceive you. That is why in hierarchy of control, Krishna guides that on top there should be conscious self. So we should be driven by our own conscience. Actually, that is the ideal part. Though if that is something spiritually is difficult to achieve, we take our refuge on intellect, and there is a big possibility that even intellect can deceive. So you're right. There is a possibility, but the answer is you have to elevate yourself one level above intellect. That is your own conscious self.
Okay. Yeah. So, all right. I think Shweta has switched off her video. I'm not sure if she's available to talk or not. Okay. I will not prod her anymore. She can come back and speak to us whenever she's comfortable. There is a question from Pooja. Can an individual in the 21st century be away from desires practically?
Problem is not with desire, actually, Pooja. Problem is the purpose of desire. Okay. So, we have to understand that difference. We can desire anything. We are free to do anything. That's how the entire Vedic philosophy is. Vedic philosophy, in fact, differentiate Jiva, Atma from even Ishwar. So it treats Jiva independent of, Atma independent of Paramatma as well at the same time. And the entire Shrishti or Paramatma has given us freedom to act. We are free to do anything. The problem is not with desire. The problem is with the purpose of desire. If the purpose of desire is driven by, demoniac activities like Dr. Milind just mentioned, that is given in detail in Gita as well, then there is a problem, because you are actually creating randomness in prarabdha. You are actually creating randomness or hurdles for others around. So we should avoid that. That is why the alignment of our purpose to the righteous, truthfulness is more important. To the universal purpose is more important. So problem is not with desire. You choose to do anything, but it should be consistent with universal objective, the universal truth.
Okay, guys, we have just time for 2 more questions. There's somebody raising hand. I'm going to ask Rishi to ask a question. Rishi Srivastav, can you ask your question? I've unmuted you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bhaiya, my question is that actually it's not a question. It's just I wanted to get a clarity about it. There are times when we don't know about what we do is right or wrong. Most of the time we actually don't know what we are doing is right or wrong. And my karma, the righteousness of my karma is, I mean, how to identify and how to differentiate about my righteousness or what we are doing is right or wrong. So this is one clarity I just wanted to know. And other thing was that isn't it little contradictory that we don't have to think about the fruits, and on the other side we do have to set a purpose or a goal? So achievement of that goal, should that not be considered as a fruit of my karma?
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice question, and it's little thought provoking actually. So let me try to answer it. The first part, Gita has given clear prescription on identifying, what is right and what is wrong in many ways, like we discussed in this presentation, prescribed act and prohibited act. Any activity which is driven by some, wrong purpose is actually prohibited. Any activity which is aligned to your purpose is prescribed act. So we should know that what we want to achieve, and if my activity is actually adding value in that achievement, is actually prescribed. So that is a clear distinction. We already discussed the righteousness of the purpose, the goal. That is one part. The second part is like, on one hand, you rightly said, on one hand, Gita says that result is not in your control. So your motive should not be the fruits or rewards of your action. But at the same time, action cannot be done without any purpose. So action is generally done for a purpose. So we need to understand this distinction actually. For example, even duty is a purpose. If we are doing duty for myself, I'm just giving a simple example, duty for my parents or my children, it is also a purpose. So we are not free from purpose. So there is reasons we do karma. We are here. In fact, if we go back to the Vedic philosophy, we have taken this body. Atma has accepted the human life for a purpose. The purpose is to, elevate in terms of knowledge and be free from the cycle of life and birth. It has repeated many times in Gita in different contexts, right? So we have a purpose. We can't deviate ourselves or avoid the purpose. The entire discussion is whether that purpose is again, I'm repeating same thing again, whether that purpose is universal in nature, whether that purpose is actually inherent to my own swabhava, whether that purpose is actually aligned to my own swadharma. That is the question we need to answer. Gita doesn't say that you don't fight for anybody. In fact, if you see in chapter 2, Krishna in one of the shlokas mentioned this to Arjuna, that अगर तुम युद्ध में जीतोगे तो क्या होगा, अगर युद्ध में हारोगे तो क्या होगा, युद्ध में जीतते हो तो तुम पृथ्वी का साम्राज्य और ये सब भोगोगे, और हारोगे तो you'll be like you'll live like a mortal warrior. So he's actually giving contemplation of result as a premise to explain or set the context of karma yoga, which means he's actually giving a glimpse of possible results or possible purpose of that war to set the context. So we are not free from that. The only subtle difference is our karma, I mean the result or reward should not be the motive or guiding principle of our karma. That is the only subtle difference. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, so we'll take the last.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I'm going to ask Mr. Umesh Chandra to unmute and ask his question. And this will be the last question of the day. Mr. Umesh Chandra. Are you there, Mr. Umesh Chandra? Okay. Looks like he has raised his hand, but he's not able to unmute, I think. All right. Okay. So, Santosh, is there anything in conclusion you want to say?
I mean, it's difficult to conclude Gita. It's a journey. The more you learn, the more question will come. You know, Gita is like ocean of knowledge. We have just discussed few parts in this presentation. And I would like to thank everyone. I think the entire group, whoever is present, is so, I mean, the combination of scholars. I can see Dr. Radhakrishnan Pillai, he is there. He himself has, you know, done so much work on Chanakya and Vedic philosophy. So Dr. Radhakrishnan.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So I'm actually honored to see such kind of audience. I can see people, scholars, you know, people researching on Gita, researching on Vedic philosophy. So I'm delighted to have such audience actually.
No, it's all Dr. Milind sir's initiative, and I enjoyed the lecture. A lot of my doubts also got cleared. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pillai.
I just want to, you know, and I hope I have not, troubled Shweta ji by keep on prodding her. But at least, the concluding, she can conclude the session by sharing if she's available. Is she there, Santosh, near you? Maybe she can use your laptop if her audio was not working properly. Okay, I think both of them have gone outside the video. Santosh, we can't hear you.
She's joining just a moment.
Yes, sir.
Now, Santosh, I will request you to, be patient and keep quiet for a few minutes. I'm very eager to hear, from, the Saraswati representative on this session. So, Shweta ji, please give us some words of wisdom. Eagerly waiting. And Santosh will go on mute now. I'm going to actually control his mute and put him on mute so that he doesn't take on questions and disturb you. Okay. Thank you, Santosh ji. Yes, Shweta ji.
As I say कि जो भी था वो संतोष का ही आइडिया है, संतोष का ही थॉट है, संतोष के ही व्यूज है. तो मैं बहुत छोटा सा पार्ट हूँ. I just thanks everyone for joining this session and keep reading Gita. मैं अभी बहुत मैं बहुत इनिशियल स्टेज में हूँ, एक स्टूडेंट हूँ अभी गीता की, तो मुझे इतनी नॉलेज नहीं है जितनी संतोष को है, बट स्टिल आई एम ट्राइंग, आई एम एक्सप्लोरिंग. और मेरा यही रिक्वेस्ट है सबसे कि प्लीज़ कीप रीडिंग गीता. एवरी टाइम यू आर रीडिंग इट, आपको नए थॉट्स, नए प्रोसेस, नई चीज़ें, नया पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू पता चलता है. समटाइम्स कुछ श्लोक्स ऐसे हैं जो मैंने पढ़ लिए, बट बाद में संतोष के जो इंटरप्रिटेशन उस पर आए तो फिर मुझे पता चला कि नहीं, ये भी एक थॉट प्रोसेस है, ये भी मतलब तरीका है इस श्लोक को देखने का या समझने का, जो मेरे पास नहीं है फ्रैंकली स्पीकिंग. तो आई एम स्टिल लर्निंग एंड संतोष इज़ गाइडिंग मी. एंड दैट इज़ वाई आई एम कीप सेइंग कि जो भी है वो संतोष की ही नॉलेज है, संतोष का ही थॉट प्रोसेस है. आई एम जस्ट सपोर्टिंग हिम. और गीता वे में जो भी चीज़ें थी वो मेरा रिसर्च वर्क था, जो स्टोरीज थी उससे रिलेटेड मैंने रिसर्च किए थे. अदरवाइज दैट बुक इज संतोष.
चलिए जल्दी से एक छोटी सी स्टोरी जो आपने रिसर्च करके ढूंढी थी, आपकी स्टोरी बता. संतोष, यू आर नॉट ऑडिबल सर.
I'm saying she is little humble.
Yes, I can see that humility. She is the Indian classical Bharatiya Sanskriti की स्त्री, सारा credit अपने बता रही है.
She has done many work.
Because that is the greatness of our culture, that our wives who are the batteries in our own lives. I'm like a mobile phone. I'm dead without my wife Smita. Same way, without Shweta, I don't think Santosh can do anything. So श्वेता जी, एक छोटी सी कहानी जो आपने आपकी बुक में लिखी है बता दीजिए, so that ज्यादा लोग आपकी बुक पढ़े, जो भी आप।
सर ये जो इन्होंने भी स्टोरी सुनाई थी रिगार्डिंग कि अगर आपको घर पहुंचना है तो क्या क्या फैक्टर्स हैं, काम कर सकते हैं, क्या चीज़ें आपके हाथ में है क्या नहीं है, तो ये जस्ट हमने एक डिस्कशन में ऐसे डिस्कवर किया था, तो इसी तरह से था, मतलब यही मेरे रिसर्च।
One of the contribution I would like to mention, she mentioned about the purpose of the coal. That idea came from her. That even non-living things like coal has a purpose to burn and give energy.
आप ही बताइए श्वेता जी, कि क्या है ये पर्पस ऑफ नॉन लिविंग थिंग, बताइए. See, I'll tell you why I'm doing this here is because to convert a very deep philosophical treatise like the Bhagavad Gita and try to apply it on a traffic signal or in office environment or in your family environment is very hard. And if you have come up with those examples, Shweta ji, and you have written them on the book, so that's why I'm interested. And maybe if this,
so I'm a very normal person.
So Dr. Milan, I would request
So Shweta, what I request you to do is whenever you are comfortable, take an independent session with us on normal. We are all normal people, except maybe Santosh, who might be more than normal.
Yeah, he is more than normal. That
Yes.
I accept.
So you can take you can take a session about normal things, how Gita can be applied in normal situations.
I'm still learning. Yeah.
Yes. So
but yeah, surely one day I will definitely do this.
No pressure. But whenever you're comfortable and ready, I would love to, have you come and tell us what are those wisdom, pieces of wisdom where, Bhagavad Gita can be applied in normal day-to-day situations.
Yeah.
Just like going to work, that, okay, I start at 9 a.m., but I'm never sure whether I'll reach at 9:30 or not. There's so many factors on the route which are at play there. Correct?
Yeah.
So thank you. And thank you, Shweta ji first, and then Santosh, because
Thank
I
you,
know
Dr.
that
Milan.
without her, I don't think you would be able to do this journey by yourself, Santosh ji. So wonderful work on the Gita way, amazing journey, and it continues. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Milan. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And all of you, if you have any feedback, questions, please write it on the Gita Way group. As I told you, both Santosh and Shweta are members of that group on WhatsApp. They'll be happy to answer questions as and when they get time. So, and just the announcement, 16th August, we have a confirmed session with Mr. Samir Parekh. Interim, if you have any sessions, you please keep following the group on WhatsApp. Thank you so much for this wonderful session. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all of you for listening to this session.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.